No, he does. I don't know what they were talking about. Anyway, just scratch that. I think it's still a good pickup for the Carolina Panthers, though. I don't know what I'm talking about, though, as far as touchdowns go. So, what do you think, and I know you'd hate this, you'd probably be screaming at your TV and wishing the worst for him because you're toxic. What if the Carolina Panthers do take Anthony Richardson with the number 1 overall draft pick?
I mean, in all honesty, I just think it would just take them a lot longer to develop him as a quarterback. Just because I feel like a lot of these quarterbacks aren't as coming out in their coming out at 2021 anymore. A lot of them are coming out at 22. It's very rare to see a quarterback that played his freshman and sophomore year going in first overall his junior year. I mean, it happens, but I mean, over the last couple of years, we haven't really seen that. I mean, Joe Burrow lit up his last year. Kenny Pickett blew up his last year. I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks that haven't really done a whole lot until, it's just interesting because I think his team, he didn't do a whole, he did enough for his team. I mean, they had some difficult games and stuff that they played, but I feel like him as a player, I think he should have taken the extra year to go maybe one more year doing some college ball and just to really see, because I mean, his numbers don't look that great on paper. I mean, he could be really good. He could be a sleeper, but it's one of those things where it's a really risky pick for somebody that's only going to be a junior. I might yell at my TV about that because I think Carolina might be making a bad move there, but I hope that it works out for them because, obviously, I mean, I don't think Anthony Richardson is horrible. The reason I called him a bum was just because he's too young. I think that he hasn't shown a lot of, potential. It's not like in his second year as a sophomore, he threw 60 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and went on to the national championship. He threw, I think, maybe 20 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and I mean, he had good yardage, but it's one of those things where it's tough to predict. Then you get a Kenny Pickett who threw 42 touchdowns, 7 interceptions his final season. And then you have Joe Burrow who didn't do a whole lot. And then all of a sudden his final season, he had, you might know better than I do. He had definitely had over 60 touchdowns. He had less than 10 interceptions and then won the Natty.
I know he won the Natty. Let me see what his.
I mean, he only played two seasons. I mean, he played 4 seasons, but he was with Ohio State and didn't do anything. And then
he sat behind Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah, and then he transferred to LSU where he blew up. So it's one of those things where, I mean, it just happens, And it was his last year.
In his, he was a 5th-year senior. His senior year, he threw 60 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, like you said. Mm-hmm. Before that, his junior year, which was also at LSU, he had 16 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So,
yeah, but that's the thing. If Joe Burrow would have declared draft that year, his stock probably would have went 4th, 5th round. He might have really developed. Later on, it might have took him a couple years, but it's kind of those things where it's if he would have gotten drafted and if let's say the Bengals would have drafted him in the 3rd or 4th round and then they put him in. The thing with Joe is it might have taken him a lot longer to develop because he had only played 3 years of college ball compared to that extra year. Mm-hmm. It's weird because it's almost like that extra year that you take before you declare draft, no matter where you are, sometimes is a very make or break thing. And it's interesting to think about because Kenny Pickett probably would have been a really solid 4th or 5th round draft pick. But then he took that extra year, his super senior year, because of the COVID year and stuff like that. Next thing you know, he's, considered one of the top quarterbacks in this weird draft year. And I mean, he shows a lot of promise. I mean, I think Anthony Richardson could be very promising, but I just don't think, there's 2 quarterbacks that are on the board right now that are sitting right in front of them that could go somewhere in the top 5 picks, which is Stroud and Young. I don't know why you would not do that because Stroud and Young have shown a lot more promise than Richardson. Young has done a lot more. I would go with Bryce Young personally, but I mean, it's not my pick. I just think that, Anthony Richardson might be a too much of a big jump for someone that's so young.
So, I mean, I think you make a really good point because I pulled up Kenny Pickett's stats as well, and we said Joe went 60 touchdowns and 6 interceptions from his 16-5 season. Kenny Pickett in 2020 went 13-9 touchdown to interception. That was as a senior. Then as a fifth-year senior, he went 42-7. So that's a huge jump. As a sophomore, and he's a third-year sophomore because he was redshirted his freshman year. It looks like Anthony Richardson was. It looks like, and granted, it's Florida. It's not a huge football school like Alabama or LSU, but Pitt isn't really either. I'd say Pitt and Florida are kind of on the same. Florida's probably a little bit bigger, but
I would say right now, yes, just because at one point Florida did have Tim Tebow and then Aaron Hernandez and all of that, and then they were a legendary team way back then. Once again, good team. Don't condone Aaron Hernandez, but he was a great player for the Florida Gators during his time.
And Urban Meyer was their coach.
Exactly. And this is all the points that I was making earlier. It's like, it was a good team. Think about the game, not the players. So that was the big point I was making. But it was a solid team. Florida was really good. And then way back in the 20th century, 80, with Dan Marino and stuff, during that era, Pitt, Pitt was a dog. They were dogs.
For sure.
So, but now Pitt's not as 2021 when Kenny Pickett did that, 42 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That was the first time Pitt had such an amazing season in a very long time. It had been a very long time. So it was a very special year. And that's why, and I think Florida, this is the same way. It was they had that really special year and then they haven't really fallen into that same position. But I think Florida has all the potential to be really good for a season or two. But I think Anthony Richardson should have given it a chance.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe no one takes him. Maybe
I think he will get drafted. I just don't think he'll get drafted as early as Carolina wants him.
He looks anxious when he throws. He gets flustered easily from what I've watched of him.
And
that's only going to increase in the NFL.
And that shows bad confidence, and that's not something you want to look at. That's something that those are things that you tweak out whenever you are in college. If Anthony Richardson would have declared draft, he probably would have started for Florida again. But the thing is he probably, maybe he's a little, nervous and stuff, but as he gets his feet more, his feet wet more, all of a sudden he goes from, shaking his hands to all of a sudden being it was crazy. You would, I said before, the reason Kenny Pickett just amazes me is just because I went and watched him 5 years at Pitt. I mean, the one season he didn't really start a whole lot, but you watch him comparing him to his his senior year that you said 13-9, the 13-9. And then you look at his senior year and just compare it. Kenny Pickett just looked so confident his super senior year that it was actually absurd. He literally he would stand there and granted, we didn't have a great ACC that year. When we played Clemson, they weren't that good, and it was just a whole thing. But next thing you know, Clemson's rushing Kenny, they're doing a blitz almost. It's a third or fourth down. Kenny Pickett just goes and just lobs it up just to Jordan Addison for a touchdown. It was beautiful. He just looks comfortable. He didn't scramble. He didn't leave. He just stayed and just went. And it was just beautiful. I mean, the play might have been a little different than how I'm remembering it in my head, but it just, he didn't move that much, and he just kind of just lobbed it up, and it was a touchdown, and it was beautiful. And it's one of those things where you could tell he was much more confident in his last year than it was his first couple of seasons. He was doing a lot of scrambling, and I mean, he's doing a lot of scrambling now with the Steelers, but I think with time, I think he can really develop, and I think a lot could happen for Richardson, but I just think it's a little too premature for him to jump in.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Panthers. I'm looking at the Panthers schedule, and there's not really a team on here that has a huge pass rush. There's some teams that, they have good players. The Lions have Aiden Hutchinson. The only team that is really a threat at the pass rush is the Dallas Cowboys with Micah Parsons. Mm-hmm. So, maybe you could get away with starting him, but I think I agree with you that he should maybe wait. I get you're excited to get in the NFL, but if you're getting anxious already playing with college guys your own age, the Myles Garrett types of the world, the superhumans, the TJ Watts, they're gonna chase you out of the stadium, I would think. But we'll see what happens. Best of luck to Anthony Richardson. I do want to move on to, we had some big names get signed this weekend.